Welcome. I just received a little comment by Vitalux, and he says, John, check out Toronto Union Station. And he talks about some anomalies with the second Toronto Union Station, and there was eventually a third. And here what we're looking at is the second. So this building in 1878 was inadequate for the people of Toronto. 1878, and this thing is just massive and abundant. And really, what function is this whole top section even going to have for a train station, according to the narrative? I don't know, but what I do know is that this building did not suffice. And let's just have a little glimpse at the population, which is actually getting harder and harder to find the populations. In 1861, okay, that's pretty close to our 1878 here. In 1861, we have a population of 65,000. 65,000 people, and this baby doesn't cut it. I mean, really, look at the tracks. I think they need to worry about the tracks and maybe a little sidewalk when you're leaving the train, as opposed to the need for building a whole new building. But nevertheless, that's exactly what they did. They would build building number 3. And here's a little look at number 3 currently. And really, I think number 2 was even more beautiful. And most likely, and pretty obviously, they were both already here. And these are both really weathered and old ruins. And even the narrative, I found it interesting, was saying that number 3 was actually not even completed, which I thought was pretty interesting. But just an absolute beauty. The columns are composed of 3 separate segments, implying Corinthian, Doric, whatever. Consequentially, these columns appear to be unfinished. The original plan for the columns is not known. And yet they tell us that it was this architectural firm, Ross and McDonald. Perhaps we could ask them what the unknown final plan was for this building that they, for some reason, did not complete, according to their story. And here's a little look at the inside of the ticket lobby, merely the ticket lobby. So very important to have a ceiling this tall. I mean, here you can see where they're selling tickets. These look like the only new things in this building. These junky little booths that they've put in here. This looks like the handiwork of our modern people. And again, why this second story here above the ticket booth? Totally unnecessary. Nobody would have complained with a 10 or even 15-foot ceiling, but no. We needed this whole second story above the ticket booth, and we needed a whole third story, actually. Here's your third story. And just a wonder. And it looks like it goes underground as well. And they showed some of the older excavators. You can get a little look here at their heavy equipment, moving dirt. A lot of progress here with this little contraption. And here they're dumping the dirt into this little carriage with a horse. Maybe 1 or 2 horses, I'm not sure. And here you go. I mean, this crew is going to build something like this. And this is showing the second station behind the supposed site of the third. So here is the second station. And Vitalux was prompting us to have a little look at all of these power lines. So the second station, 1871, pre-power, And we seem to be powered up to the brim here. And some people will tell us that these are telegraph, but way overkill for telegraph. You wouldn't need poles more than half the size with just, one wire. I mean, not this. We don't do this now, and we didn't need to do this then, not for telegraph. And just look at the Antiquitech on this. Even across the street, you can see Antiquitech on all the tops of the buildings. And this baby was powered up, it seems. I don't know if it drops down here. I'm not sure if that's a transformer. Not sure, but just a lot of tech going on for this time, for this primitive time. Again, the infrastructure not matching the people and their primitive means, as we see here. And thank you for that comment. And just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, here's a modern terminal. Here we go. I mean, this is your modern terminal. And you see my point. 8 feet, maybe 10 feet max. That's it. Nobody cares. You're just passing through. It serves its purpose. So this is your modern ticket booth. And here is your ticket booth of the past. And again, mind you, the population. What was it, 63,000? 65,000. The entire nation of Canada had about 3 to 4 million total, from East Coast to West Coast. And here, with a little population of 65,000 people, really being the size of a small city, large town, required this to sell tickets. Really, I mean, we're talking about a waiting room here. And here I just wanted to show this as a possible scenario for a mud flood. As we've talked about many different potential scenarios. And we have covered frequency before, but just a more general frequency that would cause things to sink. But this made me think about reshaping mountains. We've often looked at these maps where things seem to change completely. California being separated at one point. And we also see the mountains running east to west, ranges all the way across, whereas today our mountains run north and south. And it got me thinking about the earthquake that occurred in 1812, 1811, and the story they give us is amazing. They talk about land rising and falling, in some cases not falling back down, but really this reshaping of the landscape, the most unusual earthquake, and some lands sinking into water, and other lands rising out of the waters. And what kind of an earthquake was this? And I think about possible scenarios, and really always questioning this realm that we live in, and how little we really understand. If anything, we've only discovered that we don't understand, and what we've been told is a great falsity. And this to me is really fascinating, these kind of frequency experiments. And oftentimes we do see mountain ranges and these kind of patterns and these kind of grids laid out all over this plan. And we look at them as small people and say, how could this have been created? And these lines that we see in Peru, could this be what we're seeing? And could this be how resets are performed? And we again, being small creatures down on the surface of this, and suddenly our realm being reshaped completely. And this whole 1811, 1812, we have a very similar year on the other side of the plane in Europe. a lot of great cataclysms. And really, when we look at this list here, for example, of natural disasters in the United States, well, let's go way back. Let's go back as far as they let us. And here we go. Here's the earliest mainstream year, 1816. And as we saw here, I mean, the New Madrid earthquake is in 1811. But nevertheless, not even mentioning that, you would think that would be a pretty important thing to list here. And they're attributing this to a volcano. Volcanic dust from a massive eruption by Mount Tambora in the Dutch East Indies, presently Indonesia, in 1815, led to an abnormally cold summer in 1816 in the northeast United States and eastern Canada. Cold weather inhibited crops, and frosts and snowstorms killed what did grow, leading to a localized famine caused by a volcano, and this is in the United States. And really, this seems to be about as far back as we can go. It's as far back as they give us any records. Even these records with the USGS here, you know, we're talking about 1811. This earthquake was felt over the United States. People were awakened in the night. And here they even give us magnitudes, you know, magnitude 7.0. I can't imagine in 1811 what kind of instrumentation and the accuracy of it is being used. But let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. This is pretty much the earliest official recordings, as we can see here, 1816. Okay, we know there was an earthquake before this volcanic dust storm, only 4 or 5 years before, and a very anomalous earthquake, an area that most people never had even heard about in our mainstream. It was very late in my life that I ever heard about this earthquake that made the Mississippi River flow backwards. But nevertheless, here we go, 1816, then a great flood, California, Oregon, Utah, 1862. And my point is, this seems like the beginning. I mean, when I'm looking at this, and from what we've learned in other aspects, this seems like the beginning. This is the beginning of our reset. Or I should say the end of one and the beginning of another. And we see these massive cataclysms everywhere. And really these things that we're finding that we think are very old and we attribute to an older time frame, and we're taught are from an older time frame, are really not that old at all in some cases, just only before this time period. And as we found with clear up to 1900s, really nothing is changing. You know, these grand and glorious structures that we've been looking at, we're told are built in the 1900s, late 1800s, and not so, clearly from a time period before this. And this is the beginning of our time period. And it just starts with a big boom, a big shaking, and destruction, and really nothing else can be verified before this time period, really. And what we do see is buildings remaining, especially star forts, and just all the massive and glorious ones remaining. It's as if they were designed to protect against such events. And we do see that with their perfect symmetry and really antiquitech resemblance. They have been designed to counter or repel such a damaging force. If anything, they get buried, and these frequencies will carry sand, as you see, climbing right up the sides of buildings and burying them, climbing up. And anybody who's cut wood with various saws has seen this, where the sawdust will accumulate and actually rise up in unnatural seeming ways, just like this, but yet there is an order to it. And here we are again. Another winter. I never enjoy the winter at first. Today is the first snow. And this, in fact, is my first fire. And it's probably been cold for at least 15 days. And I've been reluctant to cut a single piece of wood until now. And it is pretty cold in here. It is 50 degrees in my house. So I guess it's pretty appropriate. It just seems like it's going to be a long winter. And this has really been making me think about the time scale on these resets. And regardless of what you believe about the shape of the Earth, we can all agree on these cycles. The cycles are still applicable. And some would call it a grand solar minimum. And again, regardless of what the sun is, or what you believe it is, be it some natural ball of fire flying through space, or a rotating luminary in the sky, what everyone can agree on, or should agree on, is what our history tells us about these cycles, and how they seem to be pointing to a reset. What else do we have? And we can see historically great cataclysms, what seem to be every 300 to 400 years. And I have been living out here in nature for about 15 years. And I feel I've become very in tune with nature and the seasons. And this year and last year, things seemed different. And if I knew nothing else, that would be sufficient to let me know that something was on the horizon, that something was changing. And I'd expected such a change, and I'd wondered which way it would swing, as it seems to be almost like a spring, unwinding and rewinding. Which way? I don't know. And this brings me to the idea of the controllers. And many people believe that these resets are some kind of thing that can be influenced by mere men. And yet what it seems like is these resets are much grander than anything that could be performed by the hands of men. And there's all kinds of stories of all kinds of different people, and they all have very similar stories. And we would call them gods, or even fallen angels. And if we're talking about Planet X and the Anunnaki and the knowledge that's found in these Sumerian tablets, which I believe to be very relevant, whereas these stories predate the Bible and seem to be everything that the Bible is, plus more detail before Genesis, and an understanding to a lot of what seemed metaphorical in Genesis now is understood more clearly through the Sumerian tablets. And what do the Sumerian tablets tell us? that there is this cyclical planet. And again, planet, whatever we give the name, the story is more important. When this planet comes around, I believe every 3,000 or 3,500 years. And again, the numbers may be off. The names may be different. But the stories are still the same. And all through our history, we also have events with comets and cataclysms following these comets. And it tells me that these cycles are ongoing. And what is a controller? Controller is not someone who controls the cycle itself, but only the knowledge. And now if you have the knowledge, you can pass this on, and you can recreate scenarios of your liking. You can prepare, and then emerge, and control the narrative. But not control the cycle, but to control the knowledge is to control everything after the completion of the cycle. And nobody will know any different. So I just wanted to share that. And very fascinating. And I guess that's it for today. I thank you so much for joining me. And do have a blessed day. Please like, comment, and subscribe.